So when I say Hall of Fame, what comes to mind? Today I'm going to be talking about Baseball Hall of Fame. My general purpose is to inform. My specific purpose is to help this class get a better understanding of all the aspects in the Baseball Hall of Fame. There's a lot of people involved, statistics, it has a long history, and great players. Preview, so I'm going to be talking about the history, different qualifications it takes to get there, and some interesting statistics. My organizational pattern was chronological, and all of these answers that I'm about to give you to these questions are from baseballreference.com. Good reference for baseball, obviously. So who's in the Hall of Fame? There's the Baseball Writers Association of America. These are the people that vote in the players, former players. There's former players, umpires, coaches, executives, pioneers, a bunch of people that just are involved in the sport. So voting began in 1936, and by this point, baseball had already been played for about 50 years. So the first couple of years of the Hall of Fame, they were just trying to catch up on all the years they missed in voting players. So they got these baseball writers to vote the players in. They had a ballot, and they would pick the 10 best players on that list. It ended up that only 5 ended up going. How has the voting changed? Now they have baseball writers still. They also have a veterans committee, which puts in people that miss qualifications, and I'll get into that later. And they also have special committee, which it involves like Negro League players, it involves old timers like umpires and all that. That's how they get voted in. How many people are in the Hall of Fame, and what's the breakdown? There's 278 people currently in the Hall of Fame, 196 major leaguers, 35 Negro leaguers, 23 executives or pioneers, 16 managers, which is the head coach, and 8 umpires. Only 2 players have ever been banned from the Hall of Fame. They were Pete Rose for betting as a coach, and Shoeless Joe Jackson, who was he was betting on games, including the World Series, which is like a big thing in baseball. You can bet on games. So for some background knowledge, and this information comes from BaseballAlmanac.com. Sorry. So the baseball writers, what they do is in voting, they vote former players that have been in the game for the past 20 years, but they played within the last 20 years, but they've been retired for 5. The Veterans Committee, like I said, votes for people who missed qualifications. So say for some freak reason Babe Ruth wasn't in the Hall of Fame yet, he played more than 20 years ago, the Veterans Committee would have to vote him in because he doesn't play within the last 20 years, so it wouldn't be the baseball writers, it would be the Veterans Committee. And the special one, there's the Negro League players. They never had like a full chance to get in at first, so that was created in 1970. So the first Negro Leaguer was actually not inducted until 1970, but I'll get into that too. So like I said, in 1936, they voted for the 10 best players they felt up to that point were deserving to go, but only 5 went. Voting later changed to every other year in the 1960s, but that didn't last too long. Like later in the 1960s up until now they vote every year again, and they vote for 10 players on the ballot, like I said. And usually not all 10 get in, but because there's a whole list and people vote for different people. So now for more from Baseball Reference, the players that are in the Hall of Fame. 1936 was the first induction to the Hall of Fame, even though 1936 was the first class. 1939 was actually the first time they inducted players. So in 1939 they gathered all the players from the first 5 classes of 1936 all the way up to 1939. And the first class to go in the Hall of Fame was in 1936, and that was Babe Ruth, Ty Cobb, Honus Wagner, Christy Mathewson, and Walter Johnson. And they're the 5 players that made it from the baseball writers who selected. 1970, like I said earlier, was the first time Negro Leaguer was selected to the Hall of Fame, and that was Satchel Paige, who's a pitcher. And there was a couple incidents where no players got voted in by the baseball writers. There were other players who were voted in by like the Veterans Committee and like the special committees, but like this is like the main way to get in, like if you get selected by a writer. But twice it happened that no one got selected by a writer, and that was this past year in 2013 and in 1996 for the two most recent occurrences. Qualifications, you can find these on baseballhall.org. The different qualifications, there's qualifications for the writers who select the players and for the players as well. The sports writers have to be a member of the sports writing committee for at least 10 years before they can start picking players. They can select anywhere from 0 to 10 players, no more than 10, obviously no less than 0, however many they feel are deserving to go. They vote once per year. Once they put in their ballot of who they chose, they're done. And you can't vote for any ineligible players such as Pete Rose or Shoeless Joe Jackson. And the player qualifications, which is also on baseballhall.org. They have to have played within the last 20 years, like I said, to be voted in by the baseball writers. If not, then the Veterans Committee or other special committees would vote them in. You have to have retired for 5 calendar years before you can cast your first ballot. You need a 75% voting to get in, and that was the issue this year. No one even came within like 10%, I think it was. Like I said earlier, the Veterans Committee will vote people that miss qualifications the first time. So, say Babe Ruth, like I said, wasn't in yet, then the Veterans Committee would vote him in. And if you receive 5% or less of a vote, or you've been on the ballot 15 times, then you're eliminated from the ballot next year, or for the rest of your life. Some interesting stats from baseballreference.com. Hall of Fame players. There have been 27 players to reach the Hall of Fame on a 90% voting or higher. 2 players share the highest percentage vote of 98.8%, and they were Tom Seaver and Nolan Ryan. And coincidentally, they were both actually pitchers. Thought that was a pretty cool stat. Out of 278 players, 2 pitchers tied for the highest percentage. The most amount of votes for a player to get in was 523 by Roberto Alomar, and that actually happened, I think, in the 1990s. So, you know, you can see how the voting has moved along pretty well. Records, there's consecutive games played record is held by Cal Ripken, and again, you can find these on Baseball Reference. 2,632 games in a row, which is over 16 seasons, which is crazy. Pete Rose with hits in a career, 4,256. Consecutive games with a hit, Joe DiMaggio, 56. People have approached that record, but no one's ever passed it. Stolen bases for one season, 130 by Rickey Henderson, which is crazy because they only play 162 games. Career wins for a pitcher, 511 by Cy Young. That's why they have an award named after him. And if you think Roy Halladay's a pretty good pitcher, in my opinion, and he only has 199 career wins, Cy Young has 511, so see how good of a pitcher he was. So this is a lot of information for one speech, I get that. But now you know the Baseball Hall of Fame has rich history, a lot of players, a lot of different stats, and but only the best get into the Hall of Fame. So.